My parents sold my childhood to a twisted cult, so I took them all down, piece by piece. 20 years later, my mom's asking for another chance. I left her on the porch like she did to me. I was raised by two extremely devout parents in this small, super tight-knit Christian church. We spent every Sunday singing hymns and listening to sermons about love and generosity. Honestly, from the outside, we probably looked like the perfect church community. But if you were one of the kids growing up inside, you quickly learned there was one twisted rule that governed everything. Give your body and your love to Christ. Pastor Michael made sure we understood this from the moment we could walk. Every Sunday after service, while parents chatted over coffee, he would gather us children for special lessons about surrender. My older sister Sarah was his favorite example of true devotion. By the time she turned 15, she was spending entire weekends at the church for what Pastor called intensive discipleship. She would come home with dark circles under her eyes and a look that told me she'd just been through what no one ever should, but my parents would beam with pride. Sarah truly understands what it means to die to self, my mother would say while serving dinner. Sarah would just stare at her plate and nod slowly like she was somewhere else entirely. I tried so hard to earn the same approval without having to attend those private sessions. I memorized the entire New Testament by age 11 and fasted every Friday until I collapsed during gym class. When I brought 3 classmates to church, my father just patted my head and said I was doing good work, but also told me that until I did what Sarah did, Christ would never truly accept me. It was on my 8th birthday that the pastor announced I was ready for deeper sanctification. I didn't know what that meant, but I could guess. And based on the fact Sarah was sitting next to him during the announcement and kept rocking back and forth in her chair, I knew it wasn't good. After service, my parents sat me down with Sarah for a family meeting about my spiritual readiness. Find a way out, Sarah whispered to me, but the second our parents stepped into the kitchen, she changed her tune. But that's how you know God is working through Pastor. The discomfort is just your flesh resisting, she chirped up loudly, looking at our parents. My mother came in with cookies and milk like we were celebrating something wonderful. We dedicated you both to God before you were even born, she said. This is his plan unfolding. That same night, I was given to the pastor. My body hurt, I felt disgusting, I wanted to throw up, but my parents told me I was doing the right thing and that God was smiling at me. At first, I hated it every time. I cried every night before I had to give myself over to the pastor and had ideations I'd rather not say here. But then over time, things changed. I became numb. I no longer cared about being given to the pastors. Thank you, pastor. And I feel God's presence became automatic responses when he was done with me. During youth group testimonies, I started sharing how blessed the sessions made me feel. I became fully indoctrinated until the night my older sister slapped me silly. She caught me praying on my own and approached me and just laid into me. She grabbed my shoulders and shook me. She told me this was what they wanted, for me to break, for me to give up and accept. That was when I realized I couldn't keep doing this. I had to find a way out. So I started documenting everything in a journal, hoping one day it would come in useful. I still had to give my body, pray, fast, but it was different now. My mind was no longer chained thanks to Sarah. My opportunity to use my documented journal came eventually. I was 16 and got a scholarship to a community college. I was overjoyed and told my parents. And they, thinking I was a sweet devout member of their church, let me enroll. I endured another 2 years, which thankfully no longer included giving myself to the pastor. I was too old by this point. But when I was 18, I went to college, and that's where I met other Christians. They taught me that God never asks children to surrender their bodies to grown men. The campus ministry leader Marcus and his wife showed me what healthy spiritual guidance looked like. No locked doors or special touching or secrets that made you feel sick. I came home junior year with Marcus and his wife to confront my parents. I brought Bible verses about protecting children and explained how real churches have windows in the doors and multiple adults present. My mother's face went from confused to furious in seconds. She slapped me hard across the face. How dare you question God's anointed? She screamed. My father was already on the phone, and within minutes, Pastor Michael arrived with 2 deacons. He took one look at me and declared I had a spirit of rebellion that needed to be cast out immediately. My parents grabbed my arms while Pastor pressed his hands on my head. Let Pastor help you like he helped me, my mom pleaded while holding down my legs. When I kept resisting, Pastor's hands moved to my throat, squeezing just enough to make breathing difficult. Marcus pulled me away from them with surprising strength and stood between us like a wall. His wife called 911 while I gasped for air, my throat burning. The deacons blocked the door, but Marcus was bigger than both of them. Years of college football evident in his stance. He told them to move or face assault charges, his voice calm but firm. Pastor Michael started quoting scripture about false prophets leading the flock astray, his face turning purple with rage. My father grabbed a baseball bat from the closet, the same one he used to teach me to play when I was little. Marcus pushed me and his wife toward the back door. We ran to their car while my parents screamed curses from the porch, their voices following us down the street. I never went back to that house again. Marcus and Rebecca let me stay in their guest room, which smelled like lavender and had a cross stitch that said, "Love lives here," on the wall. I finished college while working part-time at a bookstore, finding peace among the dusty shelves and quiet customers. My parents sent letters saying I was dead to them unless I repented. The envelopes came weekly at first, my mother's perfect handwriting spelling out my damnation. Pastor Michael had the whole congregation praying for my soul every Sunday. Sarah tried calling once but hung up when I answered. I could hear her breathing for a moment before the line went dead. I changed my number after that. After graduation, I got a job 3 states away working for a nonprofit that helped abuse survivors. I thought distance would fix everything. I went to therapy twice a week at first, then once a week, slowly unpacking years of trauma with a patient counselor named Dr. Martinez. I joined a support group for religious trauma survivors where I met others who understood why certain hymns made me nauseous. I even started dating a guy named Timothy who understood why I flinched when people touched me unexpectedly. He was gentle and patient, never pushing for more than I could give. Life was getting better, the nightmares coming less frequently. Then my mother showed up at my apartment on a rainy Tuesday evening. She looked older and thinner than I remembered. Her once proud posture now stooped. Her hair had gone gray at the temples, and her hands shook as she clutched her purse. She said Pastor Michael had a vision about me during a prayer vigil. God wanted me to come home and make things right. She cried and begged and said my father's health was failing, that his heart was weak from the stress of losing me. She promised things would be different now, that the church had changed. I almost believed her until she mentioned the special prayer retreat Pastor had planned for my healing, how he cleared his whole weekend just for me. I told her to leave and never contact me again, my voice stronger than I felt. 2 weeks later, Timothy broke up with me over coffee at our favorite cafe. He said his pastor advised him I was too damaged for a godly relationship, that my past would taint our future children. I found out later my mother had been calling his church, showing up at services with photos of our family from before. She told them I was possessed and dangerous, that I practiced dark arts and had cursed my own family. She gave them my work number too, calling during business hours to warn them about my unstable nature. My boss started getting calls about my spiritual state, anonymous voices suggesting I might be a danger to the children we served. Anonymous letters showed up warning coworkers I practiced witchcraft, complete with fabricated stories about rituals and hexes. I had to quit that job and find another one in a different field entirely. I moved apartments again, this time to a building with better security and a doorman who took his job seriously. I got a restraining order against my parents, spending hours in the courthouse filling out paperwork. The judge, an older man with kind eyes, said religious differences weren't grounds for harassment protection. He suggested family counseling instead, sliding a pamphlet across his desk. I tried explaining about Pastor Michael, but he said unsubstantiated allegations from childhood weren't relevant to the current situation. He meant well, I think, but he couldn't understand that some wounds never heal, and some families are better left broken. I left the courthouse feeling defeated, but not broken. The restraining order denial stung, but I'd survived worse. I found a new job at a medical billing company where nobody cared about my spiritual status as long as I processed claims correctly. My Supervisor Lawrence was a gruff ex-Marine who only asked if I could handle spreadsheets and meet deadlines. I could do both. For 6 months, things were quiet. I started feeling safe again. I even joined a book club at the local library where we read mystery novels and complained about plot holes over wine. The other members were mostly retired teachers who called me dear and never asked about my family. I adopted a cat named Noodle who liked to sleep on my keyboard while I worked from home. Life felt almost normal. Then Sarah showed up at my office building. She was waiting by the security desk when I arrived Monday morning, wearing the same style modest dress our mother always picked out for her. Her hair was longer now, pulled back in a severe bun that made her look older than 28. The security guard looked uncomfortable as she insisted she was my sister and had urgent family news. I told the guard I'd handle it and led her to the lobby coffee shop. She ordered black coffee with shaking hands and wouldn't meet my eyes. She said she'd left the church 6 months ago after Pastor Michael chose her daughter for special discipleship. Her daughter Lily was only 7, the same age I'd been. Sarah's voice cracked as she explained how she'd grabbed Lily during Sunday service and ran. Just ran out the doors while Pastor was mid-sermon about submission. She was living in her car now. Our parents had disowned her like they'd disowned me. The church community shunned her completely. She'd driven 14 hours straight to find me, following an old social media trail I thought I'd deleted. She needed help, needed money, needed somewhere safe for Lily. I looked at my sister who'd once held me down for Pastor and saw myself reflected in her desperate eyes. I gave her cash from the ATM and directions to a women's shelter I knew from my nonprofit days. I wanted to help more, but I couldn't trust her yet. Too many years had passed. Too much had happened. She understood and said she'd earn my trust however long it took. She left with Lily's hand clutched tight in hers, and I went to work pretending my world hadn't just tilted off its axis again. That night, I called Dr. Martinez for an emergency session. She helped me process the complicated emotions of Sarah's return. Part of me wanted to help my sister. Part of me remembered her betrayal. Dr. Martinez reminded me that Sarah had been a victim too, probably longer than I had. We were both just children trying to survive in an impossible situation. I started meeting Sarah once a week at a McDonald's halfway between our locations. Lily would play in the playground while we talked. Sarah told me things about the church I'd never known. How Pastor Michael had a whole system for grooming families. How he'd target single mothers or families with financial problems. How the intensive discipleship program had expanded to include weekend camps at his property upstate. She showed me printouts from a private Facebook group where former members were starting to speak out. There were dozens of us. Kids who'd grown up and gotten away. Some were lawyers now. Some were teachers. Some were still in therapy 20 years later. But we were all talking, comparing notes, realizing the patterns. A woman named Patricia had started compiling a timeline of Pastor Michael's appointments, tracking which children had been in the program when. I shared my old journal with Sarah. She cried reading it, apologizing over and over for not protecting me better. I told her we were both just kids doing what we needed to survive. Forgiveness would take time, but I could start with understanding. We began planning together, pooling our documentation with the Facebook group's resources. Then our mother found Sarah's shelter. She showed up with Pastor Michael and 3 deacons, demanding to pray over Lily. The shelter staff called the police, but by the time they arrived, Pastor had convinced 2 other residents that Sarah was an unfit mother who'd kidnapped Lily from the church's loving care. One of them testified that Sarah seemed unstable, that she'd been talking about demons and persecution. The police said it was a family matter and left. Sarah called me panicking. I drove 3 hours to pick them up, checking my mirrors constantly for anyone following. We went to my apartment where Noodle immediately adopted Lily, curling up in her lap like he'd known her forever. I set them up in my bedroom while I took the couch. That night I installed new locks and a security camera system I couldn't really afford. The next morning I woke to pounding on my door. My father's voice boomed through the wood, quoting scripture about honoring thy father and mother. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but the pounding stopped. I peeked through the peephole to see him walking away, but not before he'd superglued my locks. I had to call a locksmith and miss half a day of work. Lawrence grumbled but didn't fire me. The harassment escalated quickly. My tires were slashed twice in 1 week. Always just 3 tires, so insurance wouldn't cover it. Bible verses appeared under my windshield wipers. Someone kept signing me up for prayer chains and Christian mailing lists. My work email filled with devotional spam. Dead flowers showed up at my office with cards about resurrection and redemption. Human resources started asking questions about the disruptions. Sarah tried to enroll Lily in public school, but our mother had already been there. She'd told the administration that Sarah was mentally ill and had kidnapped Lily from her rightful guardians. She had forged custody papers that looked official enough to cause confusion. It took 2 weeks and a lawyer Sarah couldn't afford to sort it out. During that time, Lily had to stay inside, hidden like a secret. I reached out to Marcus and Rebecca for help. They connected us with an underground network of people who'd escaped similar situations. A woman named Donna ran a safe house 2 states over where we could stay temporarily. But the night before we planned to leave, Pastor Michael filed a missing person report for Lily. He claimed to be her spiritual guardian, appointed by God and recognized by the church community. The police showed up at my apartment at 2 a.m. They said they had to verify Lily's safety. Sarah showed them her daughter's birth certificate, her driver's license, everything proving she was Lily's mother. But Pastor Michael had provided character references from half the congregation, swearing Sarah was delusional and dangerous. The officers said they'd have to investigate further. They took notes about our living situation, asking why 3 people were crammed into a 1-bedroom apartment. We couldn't wait for their investigation. As soon as the police left, we packed everything we could fit in my car. I left Noodle with my neighbor who promised to find him a good home. We drove through the night, taking back roads and paying cash for gas. Sarah held Lily in the backseat, singing soft lullabies to keep her calm. I watched the mirrors constantly, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Donna's safe house was an old farmhouse surrounded by cornfields. She met us at the door with hot coffee and warm blankets. She'd been through something similar 20 years ago with a different church. She knew how to make people disappear legally, how to get new documentation, how to start over. She said we could stay as long as we needed, but warned us Pastor Michael wouldn't give up easily. She was right. Within a week, flyers with Sarah and Lily's photos started appearing in truck stops along the interstate. Missing, endangered child, they read, with a hotline number that went straight to the church. Our mother gave interviews to local news stations, crying about her stolen granddaughter. She wore her best church dress and held a photo of Lily as a baby, the picture cropped to remove Sarah from the frame. The Facebook group of survivors rallied around us. Patricia the lawyer said the fake missing person campaign was illegal, but proving it would take time we didn't have. A member named Ralph who worked in IT helped us monitor online chatter about our whereabouts. Someone named Catherine sent money for groceries through an encrypted app. We weren't alone anymore, but we were still hunted. Pastor Michael hired a private investigator. We knew because Ralph caught him searching our names on databases that shouldn't have been accessible. The investigator was getting close, had tracked us to the state, but not the exact location yet. Donna said we needed to move again, this time separately. Sarah and Lily would go to a contact in Canada, while I led the investigator on a false trail south. The night before we separated, Sarah and I stayed up talking. She told me about the other kids in the program now, how Pastor had gotten bolder, more systematic, how he'd started a summer camp that parents paid for, not knowing what happened after lights out, how he had a whole team of counselors now, all trained in his methods. The Facebook group had evidence, but no one who still attended would testify. They were too scared or too indoctrinated. I dropped Sarah and Lily at a bus station the next morning. I gave them most of my savings and a burner phone with important numbers programmed in. Lily hugged me tight and whispered that she loved Aunt Amy, which made me cry because I'd never thought I'd be anyone's aunt. Sarah promised to contact me when they were safe. I watched their bus disappear into morning traffic and felt more alone than I had in years. I drove south like planned, using my credit cards to leave a trail. I stopped at motels and used my real name. I wanted them following me, not Sarah. In Georgia, I thought I spotted the investigator, a middle-aged man in a rental car who showed up at 3 different gas stations I used. I led him in circles for 2 days before doubling back north. My phone rang at a rest stop in Virginia, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was was my mother, her voice strange and hollow. She said my father had a heart attack. He was in the hospital, might not make it. She begged me to come home, said he was asking for me, said he wanted to make things right before he met Jesus. I could hear the beeping of hospital machines in the background. I knew it could be a trap, but I went anyway. Maybe I was stupid, or maybe I just needed to see for myself. The hospital was real. My father was really there, hooked to machines with tubes down his throat. He looked smaller than I remembered, his skin gray against the white sheets. My mother sat by his bed holding his hand, her wedding ring loose on her thin finger. She didn't look at me when she spoke. She said Pastor Michael had promised healing if I came back, said God would restore our family if I just submitted to his will, said Sarah had poisoned my mind with lies about the church. I asked her directly if she knew what Pastor did to us as children. She said we had been blessed to serve God's anointed. Her voice never wavered. I left without saying goodbye. My father died 2 days later. I found out from the Facebook group where someone posted his obituary. The funeral was held at the church, Pastor Michael presiding. The obituary mentioned his surviving wife and daughter Sarah, but not me. I'd been erased from the family history like I'd never existed. The investigator found me at a coffee shop in Maryland. He approached my table with a friendly smile and a business card. His name was Mark, and he said he just wanted to talk. Said the family was worried about me. Said there might be a way to work things out without lawyers or police. He ordered a latte and sat across from me like we were old friends catching up. He showed me photos of the church's summer camp. Happy children playing games, roasting marshmallows, singing around campfires. He said Pastor Michael had built something beautiful for the community. Said it would be a shame if their ex-members destroyed it with false allegations. He slid a check across the table. The number had a lot of zeros. All I had to do was sign an NDA and convince Sarah to come home. I took photos of the check and his business card before sliding them back. I told him I needed time to think. He gave me 48 hours and his direct number. Said after that, things would get unpleasant for everyone involved. He left a generous tip and walked out whistling a hymn I recognized from childhood. My hands shook as I texted the photos to Patricia and the group. The group exploded with activity. Turns out 3 other survivors had been approached with similar offers. Pastor Michael was scared. The documentation we'd compiled was more damaging than we'd realized. Patricia said the NDAs proved consciousness of guilt. Ralph found evidence the church had hired a crisis management firm. We were getting close to something big. I met Mark 2 days later at the same coffee shop. I told him no deal. His friendly mask slipped for just a second, showing something cold underneath. He said I was making a mistake. Said accidents happen all the time. Said it would be tragic if something happened to Sarah or little Lily way up in Canada. I kept my face neutral, but inside my blood turned to ice. How did he know about Canada? I called Sarah immediately after he left. The number was disconnected. I tried the other burner phones we'd set up, but got nothing. Donna hadn't heard from them in days. The Safe House network went into high alert, everyone checking their contacts. For 72 hours I didn't sleep, just waited by my phone and prayed to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Finally, Sarah called from a new number. They were okay, but had to move suddenly when someone started asking questions at Lily's new school. A woman with a southern accent claiming to be her grandmother, checking on her welfare. They were heading further north, maybe Alaska. Sarah sounded tired but determined. She said Lily was doing okay, had made friends with some sled dogs at their last stop. We laughed about that, probably too hard, needing the release. Patricia called an emergency meeting of the survivors who could travel. 12 of us gathered in a hotel conference room in Pittsburgh, far from any of our homes. She laid out what she'd discovered. Pastor Michael's church was part of a larger network. Similar churches in 7 states, all with intensive discipleship programs for children, all with the same structure of isolation and control, all with survivors too scared to speak up. We had a choice: keep running and hiding or fight back. Not through courts that didn't understand or police who saw family disputes, but through documentation, through connection, through shining light in dark places. Some members wanted to go to the media, but others feared the exposure. We were all still healing, still fragile in different ways. The vote was close, but we decided to keep building our case quietly. I went back to work, back to my empty apartment that still smelled faintly of the lavender candles Sarah liked. Lawrence noticed I'd lost weight and started bringing extra sandwiches from home, gruffly insisting his wife always made too much. I threw myself into spreadsheets and data entry, finding comfort in numbers that always added up the same way. Then the church made a mistake. They sent a young woman named Deborah to infiltrate our Facebook group. She had a convincing story about escaping Pastor Michael's mentorship, but Ralph noticed her IP address traced back to the church's office. We fed her false information about a meeting in Chicago and watched the church mobilize their response. Now we had proof they were actively monitoring and targeting survivors. Patricia used this evidence to file complaints with state agencies that actually had teeth, not criminal courts, but licensing boards and child welfare departments. Churches had exemptions from many regulations, but not all. The summer camp had to follow certain rules. The intensive discipleship program couldn't violate mandatory reporting laws. It was slow, bureaucratic warfare, but it was working. My mother started calling again. Different approach this time. She sounded broken, said she'd lost everything. My father was gone. Sarah had taken her only grandchild. I'd abandoned the family. Even Pastor Michael was disappointed in her failure to bring us back. She cried about being alone, about not understanding where she went wrong. I almost felt sorry for her until she mentioned that Pastor had a new vision about our family's restoration. The pressure increased from all sides. Mark, the investigator, started showing up places I went. The grocery store, the gym, the library, always at a distance, always with that same friendly smile. My car got keyed. My mail went missing. Someone called in a gas leak at my building, forcing an evacuation during a work presentation. Lawrence finally pulled me aside and asked if I was in some kind of trouble. I gave him the shortened version: religious family, controlling church, ongoing harassment. He listened without judgment, then offered to have his Marine buddies provide security. I declined but appreciated the offer. He adjusted my schedule so I could work from home more often, saying remote work was the future anyway. Good bosses are rare, and I'd found one. The Facebook group kept growing. Survivors found us through careful word of mouth. We had testimonies from 4 decades of Pastor Michael's ministry. Patricia compiled them into a report that read like a horror novel. Pattern after pattern of grooming, abuse, and cover-ups. Churches closing suddenly when too many questions arose, only to reopen in new towns with new names. Pastor Michael at the center of it all. Then we got unexpected help. A current church member reached out through an encrypted channel. She called herself Finley and said she was a mother of 3 who'd recently started questioning the intensive discipleship program. Her eldest was about to turn 8. She'd seen things that bothered her, heard whispers she couldn't ignore. She wanted to help but couldn't leave yet. Her husband was a deacon. Finley became our inside source. She documented everything she could without raising suspicion. She sent photos of the summer camp facilities, showing locked rooms that weren't on the official tour. She recorded conversations where Pastor Michael instructed parents on breaking their children's will. She copied financial records showing large cash movements to offshore accounts. Each piece of evidence was another nail in their coffin. The church noticed something was wrong. They tightened security, required loyalty oaths, started conducting purity interviews with all members. Finley said the paranoia was intense. Pastor Michael preached sermons about wolves in sheep's clothing, about Judas among the disciples. He instituted new rules about communication with former members. Anyone caught speaking to us would be immediately expelled. Sarah finally got stable housing in Alaska. She sent photos of Lily playing in snow, her cheeks red with cold and joy. They'd found a small community that didn't ask too many questions. Sarah got work cleaning offices at night while Lily attended a school that barely had enough kids for one classroom. It wasn't ideal, but it was safe. They could breathe. I decided to visit them for Christmas. I took a convoluted route involving 3 flights and a rental car. Mark probably tracked the first flight, but I'd gotten better at losing tails. Alaska felt like another planet, all that white space and silence. Sarah met me at a tiny airport, looking healthier than I'd seen her in years. The cold agreed with her, she said. Or maybe it was the distance from everything. We spent a week pretending to be a normal family. We baked cookies and watched movies. Lily showed me her drawings of sled dogs and northern lights. Sarah and I talked late into the night about everything except the church. On Christmas morning, Lily gave me a handmade card that said, "Best aunt ever," in glittery letters. I ugly cried into my coffee while Sarah rubbed my back. The peace couldn't last. When I got home, my apartment had been searched. Nothing obvious, but small things moved. My journal from childhood was missing from its hiding spot. My laptop camera had been covered with tape I didn't put there. Someone wanted me to know they'd been there. The violation felt familiar. That old sense of nowhere being safe. Patricia called with news. The state was finally investigating the summer camp. Too many complaints from our documented evidence to ignore. They'd show up for surprise inspections, interview staff, check credentials. It wasn't criminal charges, but it was something. The church would have to follow rules or shut down the camp. Either way, fewer children would be at risk. The church's response was swift and vicious. They filed defamation lawsuits against 6 group members, including me. The papers were served at my work, humiliating me in front of coworkers. The lawsuit claimed we were conspiring to destroy a legitimate religious organization out of spite. They demanded millions in damages none of us had. Patricia said the suits were meant to silence us, not win. But we'd been silent too long already. More survivors came forward. A man named Terry from the 1980s who'd kept photos. A woman named Victoria who'd recorded pastor on a hidden tape recorder in 1995. Parents who'd pulled their children out when things felt wrong but never spoke up. The evidence mounted faster than the church could suppress it. Finley took her biggest risk yet. She volunteered to help with the camp's emergency preparation for state inspection. While organizing files, she found and copied records going back decades. Lists of children in the program, financial records showing payments to silence families, letters from Pastor Michael instructing staff on grooming techniques. She uploaded everything to our secure server before anyone noticed. The state inspection shut down the camp temporarily. They found building code violations, inadequate background checks, and concerning disciplinary policies. The church cried religious persecution, but the violations were clear. They had 90 days to fix things or lose their license permanently. Pastor Michael called it spiritual warfare and asked for emergency donations. My mother showed up at my work. She looked older, frailer, defeated. She said the church was struggling. Families were leaving. Donations had dried up. Pastor Michael blamed her for failing to bring her daughters back. She'd been removed from the women's ministry she'd led for 20 years. She had nowhere else to go. No identity outside the church. She asked if I could forgive her. I wanted to feel vindication, but mostly felt sad. She was a victim too in her way, so deep in the system she couldn't see it. I told her forgiveness would take time, but I could start with coffee. We sat in the lobby cafe while she talked about my father's final days, how he'd asked for me, how Pastor Michael had said I was too corrupted to come, how she'd started wondering then if maybe things weren't what they seemed. She gave me a box of my childhood things she'd saved, report cards, drawings, photos from before everything went wrong. At the bottom was Sarah's old diary, the one she'd hidden even better than mine. I read it that night and cried for the little girl who'd tried so hard to protect me while drowning herself. No wonder she'd eventually broken and joined them. Survival sometimes looks like surrender. The lawsuits against us stalled when the church couldn't produce evidence of actual defamation. Truth is a defense, Patricia reminded us. Everything we'd said was documented fact. The judge seemed sympathetic to our position, asking pointed questions about why a church needed such aggressive legal tactics. The church's lawyer sweated through his expensive suit. Then Finley's husband found out about her activities. She'd been careful, but not careful enough. He confronted her after finding encrypted messages on her phone. She called us from her car, crying and scared. He'd threatened to take the children if she didn't confess everything to Pastor Michael. We told her to run, but she said she couldn't leave her kids. The line went dead. We didn't hear from Finley for 2 weeks. When she finally made contact, she was in the hospital. Official story was a fall down the stairs. She didn't contradict it, but the fear in her voice told the real story. Her husband had moved the children to his mother's house. Pastor Michael visited daily to pray for her recovery and repentance. She whispered that she was sorry and hung up. The group rallied. We couldn't save everyone, but we could try for Finley. Patricia found a domestic violence lawyer who specialized in religious abuse cases. Ralph hacked into the husband's email and found messages discussing how to handle Finley's betrayal. A member named Emily who lived nearby started visiting Finley in the hospital, posing as an old college friend. The state's investigation expanded. They'd found enough problems at the camp to look deeper into the church's other programs. The intensive discipleship program came under scrutiny. Parents were interviewed. Children were gently questioned by trained professionals. The church circled wagons, coaching members on what to say, but cracks were showing. My mother called to warn me. Pastor Michael had held an emergency meeting. He'd identified me as the ringleader of what he called a satanic conspiracy. He'd shown my photo to the congregation, asked them to pray for my destruction. Some members walked out, others doubled down. The community was splitting apart. She sounded scared, but also something else, maybe free. Mark the investigator made one last approach. This time he brought a different offer. Pastor Michael would retire. The church would restructure with new leadership. The intensive discipleship program would end. All they wanted in exchange was for us to stop pushing for criminal charges, to let the past be the past. He looked tired, like a man ready to wash his hands of the whole mess. I took the offer to the group. The debate was fierce. Some wanted blood, wanted to see Pastor Michael in handcuffs. Others just wanted it over, wanted to stop looking over their shoulders. Patricia pointed out that retirement wasn't justice, but it might be the best we could get. The system still protected men like him. We voted to keep pushing. 2 weeks later, Pastor Michael had a vision during service. God was calling him to missionary work in South America. He would leave immediately to spread the gospel to unreached tribes. The congregation was shocked but supportive. They raised money for his mission, never questioning the sudden calling. He left on a Tuesday, taking several loyal deacons with him. The church collapsed without him. The replacement pastor found financial irregularities going back years. The camp stayed closed. The intensive discipleship program was quietly discontinued. Families drifted to other churches or nowhere at all. The building went up for sale 6 months later. My mother sent me the listing, said it felt like watching her life get auctioned off. Finley divorced her husband and got her kids back. The evidence Ralph had found helped prove coercion and abuse. She moved 3 states away and started over. She sent us a Christmas card with her kids smiling in front of a tree. Inside she wrote simply, "Thank you for helping me see." We'd saved at least one family. Sarah and Lily came back from Alaska when things felt safer. Not to our hometown, but to a city where they could blend in. Sarah got her teaching certificate and found work at a school that valued her protective instincts. Lily joined soccer and made friends who knew nothing about her past. They got a dog named Moose who barked at anyone who looked suspicious. I kept my job with Lawrence, who'd become protective in his gruff way. He introduced me to his wife at the company picnic, warning her I was the one who'd been having family trouble. She hugged me like I was one of her own kids and loaded my plate with homemade potato salad. Normal kindness felt revolutionary after everything. The Facebook group evolved into a formal support network. We held our first in-person conference, renting a small hotel meeting room. 23 survivors came. We shared stories, resources, therapist recommendations. Patricia led workshops on legal rights. Dr. Martinez came to speak about religious trauma. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were advocates. My mother joined the group eventually. It took time for others to trust her, longer for me, but she worked to earn it. She shared her own story of indoctrination, how Pastor Michael had targeted her as a young single mother, how the promise of community and purpose had blinded her to the cost. She apologized publicly and privately, over and over. Some days I believed her. We learned Pastor Michael never made it to South America. He'd been detained at the border for financial crimes unrelated to the church. The investigation into the camp had uncovered money laundering through the church accounts. Federal charges were filed. He fought extradition from Mexico for a year before being brought back in handcuffs. The trial was quiet, focused on financial crimes rather than abuse. He got 5 years in federal prison, not for what he did to us, but for tax evasion and fraud. Patricia said it was like getting Al Capone. Not satisfying, but effective. We'd take what we could get. Some Some of us wrote victim impact statements that the judge couldn't consider. We sent them anyway, needing our truth on record somewhere. The real victory came in the connections we'd made. Survivors supporting each other, parents learning warning signs, communities questioning blind authority. The network grew beyond our original group, helping people escape similar situations across the country. We couldn't undo our past, but we could prevent future harm. I started speaking at conferences about recognizing religious abuse. My voice shook the first time, but got stronger with practice. Sarah came with me sometimes, both of us telling our story to rooms full of social workers and teachers, people who might spot the next child who needed help. Every presentation felt like building a fence between predators and prey. Lily grew up strong and confident, untouched by the darkness that had shaped her mother and aunt. She knew the truth in age-appropriate pieces, understood why we were protective without being paranoid. She played soccer and joined drama club and dated nice kids who walked her to the door. Normal teenage life that felt like a miracle to us. My mother lived quietly in a small apartment near us. She volunteered at a legitimate charity, finding purpose in actual service. We had dinner together monthly, building something new from the ashes of our broken family. She never fully understood the harm she'd enabled, but she accepted responsibility for it. That had to be enough. The empty church building became a community center. Local nonprofits moved in, including one that helped abuse survivors. Sarah laughed when she heard, saying it was poetic justice. The basement where Pastor Michael had held his special lessons became a food pantry. The sanctuary hosted AA meetings and yoga classes. The space was redeemed by better purposes. I kept my journal from childhood and Sarah's diary in a safety deposit box. Evidence and reminder both. Sometimes I read them to remember how far we'd come. The scared little girls who'd written those words had survived to become women who protected others. We'd broken the cycle through pain and persistence and refusing to stay silent. The network published a guide for recognizing religious abuse. We distributed it free to schools, counseling centers, anywhere people might need it. The calls came steadily. People recognizing their own stories in our words. We connected them with resources, with lawyers like Patricia, with therapists who understood. Each person helped felt like retroactive rescue of our younger selves. Pastor Michael died in prison. Heart attack, the report said. Natural causes. The news felt anticlimactic after everything. No dramatic confrontation, no final justice. Just an old man dying alone. His empire crumbled, his victims free. Some of the group celebrated. I felt nothing but tired relief. He couldn't hurt anyone anymore. That was enough. We held a gathering on the anniversary of the camp closing. Not a celebration, but an acknowledgement. We'd done something that mattered. Saved kids we'd never meet from experiences we knew too well. The trauma would always be part of us, but it no longer defined us. We were teachers and lawyers and parents and advocates, survivors who'd learned to thrive. My story doesn't have a neat ending because life doesn't work that way. I still have nightmares sometimes. Sarah still flinches at certain hymns. My mother still struggles with guilt. But Lily just got accepted to college on a soccer scholarship. The network helped 53 people escape abusive churches last year. The guide has been downloaded thousands of times. We're winning in small, steady ways. I work, I go to therapy. I have friends who know my whole story. I adopted 2 cats who sleep on my bed and purr when I have bad dreams. I date carefully, but hopefully. I speak at conferences and answer emails from scared parents. I live a life that would have seemed impossible to that 7-year-old girl in the church basement. It's not perfect, but it's mine. The building where it all happened stands empty now. The community center moved to a better location. Developers want to tear it down for condos, but the permits keep getting delayed. Sarah jokes that it's cursed. I drive by sometimes, remembering. Not with fear anymore, but with something like pity. All that power reduced to empty rooms and broken windows. We outlasted it all. I kept driving by that empty building for weeks. Something about seeing it abandoned made me feel powerful. Then one morning I saw construction crews there. They were finally tearing it down. I sat in my car and watched the wrecking ball hit the walls where Pastor Michael used to preach. Sarah called while I was sitting there and I told her what was happening. She drove over and we watched together. My mother texted asking if we wanted to get lunch. We'd been doing that more often lately. She was different now, quieter and more thoughtful. She'd started going to a therapist that Dr. Martinez recommended. During lunch, she told us she'd been contacted by a documentary filmmaker. Someone was making a film about churches like ours. She wanted to know if she should participate. Sarah and I exchanged looks. The network had been approached too. Patricia was handling the legal side, making sure everyone's identity would be protected if they wanted. Some survivors were ready to go public. Others couldn't handle that exposure. I told my mother it was her choice, but to be careful. These things had a way of stirring up old pain. That night, Finley called. Her ex-husband was making trouble again. He joined a new church and was telling people she was an unfit mother. He wanted custody back. She was scared but angry too. The network rallied again. Patricia connected her with a better lawyer. Ralph found social media posts where the ex admitted to hitting her. We built her case piece by piece. Work was steady and normal. Lawrence had promoted me to team lead. I was good at spreadsheets and meeting deadlines. My coworkers knew I had a complicated family, but not the details. That was fine. I liked having a part of my life that was just ordinary. No trauma, no activism, just numbers that needed organizing. Then Mark the investigator showed up at my apartment. I hadn't seen him in over a year. He looked older and tired. He said he wasn't working for anyone, just wanted to talk. I let him stand in my doorway but didn't invite him in. He said he was sorry for his part in everything. He'd taken the job not knowing what the church really was. By the time he figured it out, he was in too deep. He gave me a flash drive, said it contained all his surveillance files on our family. Photos, reports, recorded conversations, everything the church had paid him to gather. He said we should have it, might need it someday. Then he left. I plugged in the drive that night and found hundreds of files. Pictures of me at work, at the store, with friends. It was creepy but also useful evidence. The documentary filmmaker reached out directly. Her name was Elizabeth and she'd grown up in a similar church. She understood the stakes. She wanted to tell our story right, with respect for the survivors. The network had a long meeting about it. We voted to cooperate but with conditions. No real names without permission. No footage of current locations. Focus on the system, not individual trauma. My mother decided to participate. She wanted to speak for the parents who'd been deceived. Sarah agreed to be interviewed with her face obscured. I said no at first, then changed my mind. Maybe seeing our faces would help someone recognize their own situation. Lily was off limits though. She deserved a childhood without cameras. Filming took place over several months. Elizabeth was patient and careful. She interviewed 24 survivors, some on camera, some just audio. She filmed the empty church building before it was demolished. She got footage of the camp, still closed and overgrown. She even tried to interview Pastor Michael in prison, but he refused. During filming, more stories came out. A man named Vincent contacted us after seeing a news article about the documentary. He'd been in Pastor Michael's first church 40 years ago. He had photos and letters from back then. The pattern went back further than we'd known. Pastor Michael had been doing this his whole career, moving whenever questions arose. The network kept growing. We had chapters in 12 states now. Monthly video calls where leaders shared resources. Patricia had created legal templates for restraining orders and custody battles. Dr. Martinez ran online support groups. We had a whole system for helping people escape and rebuild. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Sarah met someone at a teacher's conference. His name was Austin, and he taught high school history. She was cautious at first, made him earn trust slowly. He understood her boundaries and never pushed. Lily liked him because he coached soccer and didn't talk down to kids. Watching Sarah learn to trust again gave me hope for myself. My apartment felt too small for all the life I was building. I found a house with a small yard and room for an office. The mortgage scared me, but Lawrence wrote a glowing recommendation letter. Moving felt like another step away from the scared girl who'd run with just a garbage bag of clothes. I painted the walls bright colors and hung photos of good memories. Finley won her custody battle. The judge saw through her ex-husband's lies. She got full custody and a restraining order. She sent the network a cake with thank you written in frosting. We ate it during a video call, everyone celebrating this small victory. Her kids were safe, that's what mattered. The documentary premiered at a film festival. Elizabeth invited the network, but most of us watched online instead. Seeing our story on screen felt surreal. She'd woven together interviews and documents into something powerful. The audience gasped at the right moments. Some cried. During the Q&A, someone asked what they could do to help. Elizabeth gave them our website. After the premiere, emails flooded in. People recognizing their own churches in our story. Parents worried about their kids. Survivors who'd been silent for decades. We divided up the messages and responded to everyone, connected them with local resources, added them to support groups. The work never stopped, but every person helped felt worth it. My mother watched the documentary alone. She called me crying afterward. Seeing it all laid out chronologically had broken something in her. She finally understood the full scope of what she'd enabled. She apologized again, but differently this time. Not seeking forgiveness, but acknowledging harm. I told her healing wasn't linear for any of us. Pastor Michael's lawyers contacted Patricia. He wanted to make a deal. Information about the wider network of churches in exchange for early release. Patricia laughed and hung up. We already knew about the network. We'd been mapping it for years. His information was worthless. He had no cards left to play. Spring came and Sarah announced she was getting married. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. She asked me to be her maid of honor. We went dress shopping together, laughing at poofy options. She chose something simple and elegant. Lily would be a bridesmaid. My mother would attend but not participate. We were building new traditions. The wedding was perfect. Outdoor ceremony in a park, no church in sight. Austin's vows made Sarah cry happy tears. Lily read a poem about family being chosen. I gave a speech about survival and sisterhood. Even my mother smiled genuinely. The reception was at a restaurant with good food and no prayers. We danced until midnight. A week later, another survivor reached out. A young man named Juan, whose parents were still in Pastor Michael's network. He was 18 and scared. We activated the extraction protocol. Safe house ready, legal advice on standby, job resources lined up. He left on a Tuesday while his parents were at prayer meeting. Another one saved. The empty lot where the church had been became a garden. The city approved a community project. Survivors from the network came to plant flowers. We didn't make it a memorial because this wasn't about remembering. It was about growth. Kids from the neighborhood helped. By summer, it was beautiful. Life growing where darkness had been. I started dating a guy named John from my book club. He was a librarian who made terrible puns and good coffee. I told him my history on our 5th date. He listened without interrupting. Asked how he could be supportive. He didn't treat me like broken glass afterward. We took things slow but steady. It felt healthy and normal. The documentary won awards and got wider distribution. Elizabeth donated profits to the network. We used the money to expand services, hired a full-time coordinator, rented office space, created scholarships for therapy. What started as a Facebook group had become a real organization. We incorporated as a nonprofit with a board and everything. Pastor Michael had a stroke in prison. He survived but couldn't speak anymore. Some of the network saw it as divine justice. I just saw an old man facing consequences. The state moved him to a medical facility. He would die there eventually, forgotten by everyone but his victims. His empire was dust. We were still standing. My mother started volunteering with the network. She answered phones and filed paperwork. Other survivors were suspicious at first, but she proved herself through consistency. She became especially good at talking to parents who'd just discovered the truth. She knew their guilt and could guide them through it. Redemption through service. Sarah and Austin bought a house near mine. Lily got her driver's license and immediately became everyone's chauffeur. She was applying to colleges, thinking about social work or law. She wanted to help people like we did. We tried not to pressure her, but were secretly proud. The next generation learning from our pain. Another church in the network got exposed. Similar patterns, different state. The survivors there used our template for organizing. Within months, they had their own support group, their own documentation system. We shared resources and strategies. The network was bigger than any individual story now. It would outlive us all. I got promoted again at work. Lawrence joked that I'd have his job soon. The stability felt good. Regular paychecks, health insurance, retirement savings, things I'd never thought I'd have. I could help other survivors financially now. Paid for hotel rooms during escapes, covered therapy co-pays, used my ordinary life to enable extraordinary rescues. John proposed during a hike. Simple ring, heartfelt words. I said yes. We planned a small wedding like Sarah's. No church, no pastor, just promises between equals. The network celebrated with us. These people who'd seen me at my worst now got to see me at my best. That felt like the real victory. A journalist contacted us about a book. She wanted to expand the documentary into deeper reporting. The network discussed it for weeks. Books lasted longer than films. They could reach different audiences. We agreed, but with the same conditions. Protect identities, focus on systems, center survivor voices. The truth needed telling, but carefully. My wedding day was cloudy but warm. Sarah stood beside me. Lily did a reading. My mother sat in the front row, crying good tears. John's family had embraced me completely. His parents knew my history and didn't care. The ceremony was in a botanical garden. We wrote our own vows. Mine included a line about choosing joy after sorrow. The book came out a year later. It made some bestseller lists. More emails, more people reaching out. The network had protocols now. Trained volunteers to handle intake. Partnerships with therapists nationwide. We were professional about saving people. What started as desperate Facebook messages had become a movement. Pastor Michael died on a Tuesday. Heart failure, the report said. The network got the news through various channels. Some members wanted to celebrate. Others felt nothing. I was in the middle of a work presentation when I found out. I finished the presentation, went to the bathroom, and felt relieved. It was over. He was gone. We didn't go to his funeral. Neither did my mother. She said that part of her life was dead already. The church people who still believed held a small service. They called him a martyr. We kept doing our work. His death changed nothing about what we built. He'd been irrelevant to us for years already. Life settled into rhythms. Work, home, network meetings, dinners with Sarah's family, book club with John, therapy every other week. I got pregnant and we painted the nursery yellow. Sarah threw me a shower with no prayers or prophecies. Just friends celebrating new life. Normal felt revolutionary after everything. The baby came early but healthy. A girl we named Hope, which felt right. Sarah and Austin were there. My mother waited in the hall giving us space. Lily held her cousin and promised to teach her soccer. John cried more than me. The nurse said we looked like a happy family. We were. The network published its 10th anniversary report. Thousands of people helped. Hundreds of churches exposed. Laws changed in 3 states because of our advocacy. We built something that would outlast us all. Patricia was training new lawyers. Dr. Martinez had created a whole therapy certification program. The work continued. I went back to work after maternity leave. Lawrence had saved my position. Balance was hard but possible. John and I traded off childcare. Sarah helped constantly. My mother babysat weekly, earning trust through diaper changes. We were making it work. Building the family we'd never had. Another documentary filmmaker reached out. This one wanted to focus on the network's success. How we'd built systematic response to systematic abuse. We agreed to participate. The story had evolved beyond individual trauma. We were teaching others how to fight back, how to build support systems, how to heal together. Hope learned to walk in the garden where the church had been. Flowers bloomed around her as she toddled between me and John. Sarah took pictures. My mother sat on a bench, watching her granddaughter play where her grandson had been hurt. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. We'd won by surviving. The network kept growing. International chapters now. Similar patterns everywhere. Religious abuse wasn't unique to our denomination, but neither was resistance. Survivors finding each other, building resources, saving others. We'd created a template that worked. Documentation, connection, sustained pressure, simple tools that broke complex systems. I spoke at the network's annual conference, told our story to a room of 200 survivors. Sarah and I did a joint session on sibling dynamics in abusive systems. My mother ran a workshop for parents. Lily, now in college, volunteered at registration. The teenager we protected was protecting others. The cycle continued, but differently. Work stayed steady. Spreadsheets and deadlines and normal problems. John and I bought a bigger house. Hope Hope started preschool. Life was beautifully ordinary most days. The activism was part of me, but not all of me. I'd learned to hold multiple truths: survivor and thriver, wounded and whole, past and present. The book about our network won journalism awards. More churches got exposed, more laws changed. We'd shifted from reactive to proactive. Training mandated reporters to spot signs, creating curricula for healthy youth programs, setting standards that protected children, using our pain to prevent others. My mother got sick, cancer, fast moving. She faced it with the same determination she'd once given to the church. She used her remaining time to record testimony, full confession of everything she'd known and ignored. She wanted it on record. Patricia added it to our archives, evidence and apology combined. She died on a Sunday. We held a memorial at the Botanical Garden. No hymns, no pastor, just people sharing memories. Sarah spoke about forgiveness. I spoke about redemption. Lily sang a song she'd written. The network sent flowers. Even in death, we did things differently, better. Hope grew up knowing the truth in age-appropriate pieces. Why we were careful about sleepovers. Why we didn't go to church. Why Aunt Sarah sometimes cried during certain songs. But mostly she knew love, safety, choice, the everything we'd fought to give her. She was free in ways we'd never been. The network hired full-time staff, real salaries, benefits, professional development. We'd grown beyond what volunteers could manage. I joined the board, using my business skills for strategy. Sarah created educational programs. We were building institutions to counter the ones that had hurt us. Systematic response to systematic abuse. Years passed. Hope started middle school. John and I had another child, a boy named Marcus, after the man who'd first helped me. Sarah and Austin adopted siblings from foster care. Lily became a lawyer like Patricia. The family we'd built looked nothing like the one we'd escaped. That was the point. I still drive by the garden sometimes. Kids play there now. Families have picnics. No one knows what was there before unless we tell them. And mostly we don't. The flowers are enough. Beauty where ugliness had been. Life where death had reigned. We'd won by outlasting, by building better. The network spans continents now. Thousands of volunteers. Millions of dollars in resources. Laws changed. Children protected. Survivors thriving. What started as my sister slapping sense into me had become a movement. We'd taken our pain and transformed it into power. Not the kind Pastor Michael had wielded. The kind that saves. I'm in my 50s now. Hope's in college. Marcus plays soccer like his cousin did. John's hair is gray, but his laugh's the same. Sarah and I have lunch weekly. We're normal middle-aged women with jobs and mortgages and kids who roll their eyes at us. You'd never know our history unless we told you, but we do tell. At conferences and trainings, in therapy sessions and support groups, to reporters and researchers, to anyone who needs to hear that survival is possible, that escape can happen, that life exists after trauma. We tell our story because silence is what let it happen, and will never be silent again. The little girl who memorized scripture to avoid abuse became a woman who rewrote the rules. The teenager who documented trauma in secret became an advocate who exposed systems publicly. The young woman who ran became a leader who stood ground. I'm all of those people and none of them. I'm just me, living proof that they didn't win. And that's really the end of it. No dramatic conclusion, no perfect justice, just life, continuing on. Work tomorrow, dinner with family this weekend, board meeting next month, normal, beautiful, chosen life. They taught us to die to ourselves. Instead, we learned to live fully, freely, finally. We won by surviving, by thriving, by refusing to let our stories end where they wanted them to, by writing our own endings, one ordinary day at a time.